Hello, and a very warm welcome to this episode of In the Box Extra Time. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. My name is Charlotte Richardson, and I am the co host of this episode because I'm delighted to say, alongside me, I have Sarah Cummings. Hi, Sarah, how are you?
Hi, Charlotte. I'm good, thank you. It's good to be joining you today.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. Firstly, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your role at the Football Association.
So, I am the England Football Accredited Manager at the FA. So, my role is to look after our 8,000 strong network of accredited clubs, which range across 1, 2, and 3 star clubs. So, we have a key focus around increasing the number of 2 and 3 star clubs within the network to help make our offer more inclusive and help to promote more opportunities across a variety of pathways.
Well, it's brilliant to have you with us. And the focus of this extra time webinar, it's all around creating a positive football environment. And I was really fortunate enough recently to go and visit Cosy Sports Club, an incredible sports club that have built values around being inclusive, like you mentioned there. And I'm delighted to say a little bit later on in this webinar, we have a special guest, Suter from Faversham Strikeforce, who have been doing some really, really good work. But for those joining us who might not really have a definition or understanding in their mind of what a positive football environment is, what does it mean to you?
So for us, it's around how we change and improve behaviours within football. So we've recently done a number of initiatives which are helping to improve poor behaviours that we've seen. So we've released some campaigns and communication to help with promoting some of the messaging around some of the sanctions or some of those things that have been put in place to help tackle some of the persistent low level behaviours. And these are in place to help not just support the players, but also to support the parents, the spectators, the coaches, and the clubs themselves, just to make sure that everybody can have an enjoyable experience.
I think that's really important there, isn't it? Because it's not just necessarily about the players and the officials, it's the wider community of a football club. We're looking at trying to get more people involved in volunteering, in supporting clubs to run on a day to day basis. And some of these challenging, quite frankly, toxic behaviours from the sidelines not only infiltrate what goes on the playing field, but far more widely as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we want to try and achieve is just allow the players to play and everyone to play their part, really. And some of these behaviours are getting in the way and taking some of the experiences for people. And when you think to the people that are involved in the game, we've got families that attend these football clubs, and they might have siblings, brothers, sisters, mums, dads that all play or have a role in the game. And we spend a lot of time at our football clubs or engaged in the game, and it's important that we enjoy the time that we spend there, and this is what we're trying to tackle with this campaign, to try and make sure that everybody has a right to have that experience when they're down at the football club.
What was really interesting, and for anyone who hasn't watched the episode of In the Box yet, please do, because there are some adorable interviews with the youngsters at Cosy Football Club, and I asked them quite simply about why they enjoy football and how they want people to be on the sideline, and the message was loud and clear. They want to be able to just play and to focus, and that is the simplicity of the message, really, and the line is quite firm in terms of what is acceptable behaviour and what isn't.
Yeah, exactly. And this is something that we've not really addressed much previously as well. It's more of that grey area of those like persistent and nagging things that happen both on and off the pitch that are ruining the game. So it's less so the incidents around the discipline side of it. It's more of the other stuff that's creating that toxic atmosphere that you mentioned. And we've used the videos, and I know, like you said there, with the players to stress that messaging of what's acceptable and what isn't, and what that means, and how that can mean that you won't be involved in the game and you won't be allowed to engage because your behaviours are ruining it for the people around you.
Well, you mentioned a grey area, which lends itself nicely to the work being done by the FA around the Enough is Enough campaign. And it's a really powerful campaign, and it's consistently outlining how that negative impact, both on and off the pitch, affects not just the individuals, but the wider community as well. So let's have a little watch of the campaign video that was released in September.
This is Andy. He's your typical dadda too, footy-loving type. Football is his whole world. He loves watching it, and he used to love playing it. But those legs ain't what they used to be. So now he loves watching his kids play it. Or at least, he did. You see, it's a Saturday morning, and Andy should be at his son's game, cheering him on, giving him support, being a great role model on the sideline. But Andy's at home, because Andy isn't welcome at his club anymore. Andy thought the sideline was a place to shout, scream and swear every week. So now, Andy has had his club membership removed and his son has stopped playing because he was embarrassed to have the dad who got banned from football. Football deserves better. Enough is enough.
Yeah, a very powerful campaign message there, Sarah. And I think for me, the overwhelming thought from that is that you have a lot of passion on the sideline, but I think each of us, and I'm sure all the volunteers tuned into this webinar, will have encountered someone like that parent. And ultimately, it's not just them who's punished or suffers, it's the son, it's the club, it's the wider community. There's been a lot of strong engagement and reaction to these campaign videos. Do you think it's hit a nerve in terms of what people see on a far too frequent basis in grassroots football?
Yeah, I do. I think it demonstrates, like you said, it's beyond the player, isn't it? When there's parents on the sideline, they are ultimately going to prevent their children from enjoying the game, because they're not going to be allowed to play. So I think I think it has struck a nerve because it's tried to make it everybody's responsibility rather than just a specific individual, whether that's the parent, the coach, the player. It's making that collective agreement as a club that you're going to commit to, behaving as you should be because it's in the best interest of everybody.
When we went to Cosy Sports Club for that episode of In the Box, they'd created some fantastic videos of their own. And if you're someone listening to this wanting to share that enough is enough message, you might not necessarily have the time or resource to produce a video of your own. So please do go and head to the FA's website where you can check out that video again and another one as well that has been produced. And it might support you, it might empower you to spread that message across your club and maybe even your league. Sarah, I wanted to get your thoughts as well on another initiative that took place a couple of weeks ago on the 5th and 6th of November, the Silent Support Weekend. Now, this was targeted across youth football specifically. And tell us a little bit more about the concept and, again, the need for it, I suppose, particularly in youth football.
Yeah, so I think it ties into a couple of things we've mentioned, but this one's more around reducing that pressure that's being put on youth players within grassroots football and showing the respect to the right people, whether that's the officials or just your opposition, whoever it might be. So the main sort of concept of the weekend is all around showing your appreciation. So showing your appreciation for the other teams, showing appreciation for the officials and everybody that's there. So it's all centered around not shouting, no instructions coming from the sideline, nothing to that effect, just clapping, just positive enforcement of clapping and celebrating the teams and the players that are involved.
Because I think there's a lot of feedback, not only in the young players who I interviewed for that In the Box episode, but more widely across the game, that if you speak to any young player, they just want to be able to listen to their coach, or they just want to be able to make the right decisions by themselves, or maybe actually make the wrong decisions, but then be guided in the appropriate way after. So I think it's really good that that weekend has taken place, and over 100 leagues being a part of it as well is a really, really good sign. Before we head on to our team talk and introduce our guest for this webinar, I wanted to talk to you as well about the Respect relaunch, which is taking place next year. And I know the We Only Do Positive campaign was launched a couple of seasons ago. It feels like it's only been around for a short time, but it's had such an impact and it's been quite sustained in its messaging. This problem for the game has had lots of different waves of campaigning. It's been a really consistent message from the FA, and I just don't see it changing anytime soon. I just wondered what your thoughts were on it.
Yeah, I agree. I still remember the We Do Positive, and I've still seen some examples of that when you're wandering around leagues or clubs at the weekend, and they're still pushing out that messaging to make it clear that what they for the behaviours and the way that they want people to be when they're in and around their clubs. In terms of my world with accreditation as well, we know that a lot of our clubs, because all of them promote the code of conduct and the respect assets and all of that stuff through their accreditation, and they make sure that players and coaches and parents all sign up to the code of conduct, and make a commitment for what they're going to do, what they're going to be like when they're in and around the club.
I think the main message, isn't it, is positivity always wins. And I would encourage anyone who's tuning in to this webinar just to keep your eyes peeled, because more information will be coming out from the Football Association about the Respect relaunch and centres and so on that you can become a part of, because this is a hard subject to tackle. And perhaps for volunteers who already give up so much time, it's something that is a challenge to embed. But as we learned at Cosy Sports Club, there are really effective means of doing so. And we're going to learn even more now as we enter our team talk and introduce Lee Suter from Faversham Strike Force. Lee, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here. You're a volunteer at your local football club. Tell us about Faversham Strike Force and your role at the club.
Hi, Charlotte. Hi, Sarah. So I am Club Development Officer at Faversham Strike Force, and my role is to look after our volunteer workforce. We've got over 600 players, 40 teams from under sevens all the way through to our senior men's and ladies. And we also have walk-in football and many other initiatives going on as well.
That's great. Lee, could you give us a bit more insight into what a positive football environment means for you?
Yeah, I think a positive football environment is very personal to that individual. But as a club, I believe that we try to create an environment where everyone feels like they can have fun, enjoy themselves, be active, be part of something that's bigger than themselves, be part of the community, and start being creative, taking risks. So if you're talking about young players, being able to dribble, run with the balls, and feel that they can make mistakes and learn from them, so they can start developing their memories and they want to repeat it again and again every weekend.
And Lee, how important has it been at Faversham Strike Force, not just in recent history, but the longer term, to create a positive football environment? Because I know that you've done lots of work promoting some of the messages that Sarah and I have been talking about for this webinar for a very, very long time.
Yeah, it's a golden thread that runs throughout the club, is creating this positive football environment, and it's very much a top-down approach. So as trustees of the charity and committee, we live and breathe creating this positive environment and what Faversham Strike Force means. I think it's about how we role model it. We have clear values and behaviours about being the best we can be, not just as footballers or volunteers, but being good people. We use codes of conduct and policies to drive that as well. But as we all know, that accepting terms and conditions on a website or accepting cookies, it's just a tick of the box, sometimes code of conducts. So it's about actually demonstrating what good looks like and how people should act when they're on the sideline or cross that white line and play.
Yeah, and like you've described there, it's very much a whole team approach, isn't it? In terms of it can start with those chats as a committee, but you've really got to bring it to life on the pitch. So just intrigued to know what's worked well for Faversham Strike Force and how you've implemented it.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Sarah. So first and foremost, we don't get it right all the time. We're always trying to progress. We always have to face challenges that many grassroots clubs face on a weekly basis after every weekend or training session. I feel for us what's worked really well is we've got experienced people in the right roles sharing responsibilities. So it's not down to just one person to drive an ethos. We have over 150 volunteers. So there's lots of voices, there's lots of good people. And we feel that their sharing their own values and behaviours and aligning it with our club really drives that message. And sharing that workload as well. So people can have the opportunity to have positive conversations with others and share what the club means and what we stand for, really projects that message across the parents and players that we've got within the club.
I think that's really interesting how you've utilised and maximised your volunteer workforce. And I absolutely loved when you mentioned in your answer the idea that this is a golden thread within the football club, the focus on creating a positive football environment. And for a lot of clubs across the country, part of the success, if you are going to build a positive football environment, is having it come from the top down. And you mentioned that with your values and so on. Was that important? Was that an important piece in this as well, that you as trustees, committee members and so on made sure that that thread went from the top right through down to the grassroots player making their way onto the pitch?
Yeah, it's really important, and it's not an overnight thing. We've been around over 20 years now, so we have progressed as we've gone along and got better at what we do and recognise what's good and what we need to deal with. So yeah, that golden thread is important. Also, it helps with succession planning when good people move on and we might need to replace them for whatever reason. They can come into an environment that they know exactly what's expected of them and the message we expect them to deliver as well. So that succession planning is key, and that golden thread allows it.
Yeah, and it's absolutely fantastic to see that you've been so proactive and on the front foot with it all. And just thinking around when things are a bit more tricky, and understandably, nobody's perfect. Have you got any examples you can share with us of when things have been challenging for you when you've tried to get this messaging across?
Yeah, and as I said earlier, we don't get it right all the time. The bigger the entity, the more challenges we get, and that's across business or grassroots football. The more employees or volunteers or players you get, the bigger a challenge it is. So we do face the same challenges other clubs do, of a parent, a coach, or a player not conducting themselves in the way that we feel they do. And I think that was evident coming out of the COVID situation. People getting set in their own ways that might not align with us. But also for us, one of the biggest challenges was we come out of lockdown not with a bang or a big surprise, but getting back to playing football was quite a speedy approach as well. So we had to get volunteers in place that necessarily we wouldn't have got on board, but we had to because of the necessity of time. And clubs probably face that every year with the under sevens, for example, is they expect parents to step up and step forward, and they're taking a leap of faith. And I think the important thing there is having a good recruitment process in place. So how do you track references? What questions do you ask? And going with your gut most of the time does work. Is this person right for the club? Do they align with us? Are they going to be a good fit?
I think that's a fantastic answer, Lee, and gives a kind of really raw honesty of what a lot of people joining us will be sort of experiencing and encountering. And sometimes when you are that trustee or when you are that leadership figure in a football club, like you say, you do have to go with your gut, and you have the policies and everything else, the values to back you up and to help you if you have challenges. And sometimes it's really difficult if you see poor behaviour. It's intimidated, it could be aggressive, it can be difficult. When I was at Cosy Sports Club for In the Box, the welfare officer there explained how he quite simply had some business style cards made up with the do's and don'ts, and he would make a point that if there was a new team or if there was new parents and so on, to go over to them, shake their hand, give them the card, and that sort of set the tone and the expectation. I know that Strikeforce is a really innovative, creative and forward-thinking football club. Have you got any examples of perhaps little things or slightly bigger things that you've used that have worked effectively for you, perhaps that have been maybe more innovative?
Yeah, I think creating a positive football environment is a long-term approach. So yourself and Sarah talked about how the campaign's always ongoing and being refreshed. I think that's our approach as well. So on a Friday night, across our social media platforms, we get a message out about expectations of parents and adults within the game and sharing some tips about how they can act. We also we moved away from having man of the match or trainer of the week to hero of the week and hero of the match. And we asked managers to drive the selection of who got the hero awards around positive values. So rather than just giving an award for someone who might have scored the winning goal, actually, what else did they do in the game that showed their good character? Was it they worked hard? Was it they showed fair play? Was it they helped another person with passing the ball to them, sharing the ball, or just being a real good team player? So we tried that, and we promote all our heroes on our social media so everyone can buy into this celebration of what a good person looks like, not just what a good footballer looks like.
Yeah, there's some absolutely brilliant examples in there and really inspiring to listen to. I'm just thinking from clubs who will have a real keen interest in all of the stuff that you're doing, and perhaps sat there thinking, what can we do? How can we implement some of these things into our club? What kind of key takeaways would you give them, or top tips to help them get started along this route if they're not already there?
Yeah, for me, one of the key elements is good recruitment. So surround yourself with good people that share your values and behaviours, whatever that might be, whatever you've agreed as a club. What do we want to look like to our audience, our players, and also visitors? What do we want to look like? So surround yourself with good people that will check and challenge yourself and others to make sure you've got the positive behaviours, and just keep getting that message out there. I think that's really key. If you take a break in getting that message out, some bad habits will seep back in. So it has to be a continued, ongoing message throughout the season, throughout your summer break, so people always have it all the time at their front of their memory.
I'm like making notes here in myself, and that point about the message being there consistently is really important. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be labor intensive. With scheduling tools now that there are available on social media, an hour could actually help you schedule those messages for a few months. And for anyone tuned in, do go and check Faversham Strike Force out on the socials, on Instagram, Twitter, and so on. Give them a follow, because they are an example of best practice at being consistent with that message. And I absolutely love the idea of the hero of the match or the hero of training the week, because like you say, it's more than just being a footballer. And I suppose as well, Lee, ideas like that give you the opportunity to constantly reinforce the messaging that Faversham Strike Force is there to provide playing opportunities, but you're there to help young players, old players, have enriching lives, which is ultimately, again, the wider purpose of football, isn't it?
Yeah, I totally buy into that, Charlotte. I think sport as a whole, not just football, has a real positive place to play within the community. It can drive good behaviours, discipline, fair play, being passionate, being active. And we know that being active also positively affects your mental health as well. So it can have a wider effect that ripples through your community.
It really, really can. Lee, look, that's all the time we have on this Team Talk. Thank you so much for giving up even more of your time. I know you do a lot of that in the week with Faversham Strike Force, and allowing us to hear what you've built at your football club with the team of volunteers you've got there. Keep up the amazing work. And for those tuned in, like I said earlier, go and check out the website, follow on social media, because there are constantly really positive messages coming from Faversham Strike Force.
Thank you.
Sarah, it was great to hear from Lee there, especially when we were talking earlier on at the start of the webinar about the Enough is Enough campaign, about what's coming up in the new year with respect. I think Lee's point about being consistent and implementing some solid ideas that reflect your values, it kind of echoes everything that in the box covers that the accreditation does as well. So hopefully for those that are joining us, it shouldn't be something that feels daunting. It's actually something to embrace and just enhance what volunteers are doing at their clubs and leagues.
Yeah, I totally agree. We know that clubs do so much beyond the pitch, and not just providing the players with opportunities to play. And I think what Lee discussed, he really brought that to life. And I really enjoyed that they had a people first approach. It was very much around what they try and implement, but putting the person at the centre of it, and actually just creating good people and helping to develop good people. And I think the way that he simplified some of the top tips, and some of the things that they're doing, like you said, it makes it less daunting, and everyone can have a go at some of this stuff, at bringing it into their club.
Because I think ultimately the best clubs that I've visited, the ones that are growing, the ones that are thriving, are the ones that have that positive environment. The ultimate aims are to have players playing with smiles on their faces, to rotate and make sure everyone has, quality playing time, and it removes any aggression, any poor behaviour. It infiltrates it, and it becomes a self-regulatory thing, which is in the long term what we want, because it takes that pressure off of volunteers.
Yeah, I agree. We want people to feel like they can challenge some of these things, but in a really positive way, and trying to bring to life what it means to embody the positive behaviours, and really demonstrate those on the pitch side. And I think when clubs get it right, like Strike Force, when people walk through the door of the club, they get it. They know what's expected of them. They can see it. And then it's very difficult to go against that when that culture already exists within the club and it's part of their identity.
Yeah, ultimately, we come back to the point that we started with. It is all about the positivity. And I hope that everyone tuned in to this In the Box Extra Time webinar has taken away some practical tips of how ultimately creating a positive football environment will help your football club become more sustainable, become a more enriching asset within its community, and ultimately be more successful. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me. An absolutely outstanding debut, it must be said.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It really has been a delight to have you. And thank you again to Lee Suter from Faversham Strike Force. Don't forget to go and check out the episode of In the Box, where again we go and visit Cosy Sports Club. You can pick up even more great tips and some really good interviews. Sometimes you just need to listen to the players themselves. That's all we have time for in this episode of Extra Time. Don't forget to have a little browse around the Clubs and Leagues Hub on YouTube, and join us again very, very soon. But until then, take good care.